Hey friends, it's Just the Gems, I'm Brandon. Last time we started forming a canon of Western release JRPGs, and I want to continue that today. One quick point of clarity, I'm using the term canon here as in collection of accepted works, not as in the thing with a fuse that goes boom. Different canons. Anyway, these are the JRPGs that, in my mind, are the most essential games to play. Last time we talked about the first 3 generations of home consoles, at least the ones that matter in this context. Sorry, Atari. Now we're moving on toward the modern day, so buckle in and let's get going. Oh, but please like and subscribe. Thank you. All right, here we go. Okay, we've made it through the medieval, the Renaissance, the Restoration periods. Next up, we have the Romantic period. Sorry, I won't ever do that again, I promise. The Romantic period is what I'm calling the PlayStation 2, a GameCube era. I don't have any GameCube games on here, sorry. But PlayStation 2 era of JRPGs. So let's get into it. Okay, the first one I want to talk about, naturally, Final Fantasy X. This game has, I don't know, it's kind of gone through the ringer, I feel like, a little bit over the years. It's had resurgences of popularity and then fallen down into the pits of criticism again from time to time. It can be polarizing, and especially X-2, the sequel, I think can be pretty polarizing as well. But Final Fantasy X as a work of fiction and as the big first step into this new generation of consoles, once again, just sort of, it did what 7 did, it did what 4 did. It just kind of set the tone for, or maybe not set the tone, but set the bar, right? Where this is what games are going to be, this is what JRPGs are going to be judged on going forward. This level of quality, this level of presentation. If you want to have a AAA RPG experience, and let's face it, back then, there weren't indie games, like there weren't single A or double A titles really, like companies were go big or go home. They put their best foot forward, and it was a very high bar to meet. The gameplay was changed up now for the first time since 4, right? Like in a significant way. We didn't have the active time battle system anymore. We had the point, I don't know, it was like a kind of a more of a turn-based sort of deal with your party member turn, or your enemies and party members on turn order bar there at the top. And that turn order bar, I should say, ended up being a much kind of copied mechanic. And the storytelling, right? The storytelling was brought up to yet another high level, where you have a significant amount of fully voiced animated cutscenes throughout the game. You know, like the days of the little pixelated or polygonal characters talking to each other with text boxes was basically over at this point, right? This was the dawn of this new era of JRPG storytelling. It's, I think, maybe my second favorite Kazushige Nojima written game, 7 being the first. But he wrote 7 and 10, and I'm a big fan of his and his style, and so I love Final Fantasy X. I'm gonna include, I didn't grab it. Now, I haven't included any games from this series yet. We did get some in the West during the PlayStation era. They did not grab me at the time, and I've dabbled in them in my older age, and they still just do not grab me. But these games were the first ones chronologically in the series that did. So I would like to talk about them. And they are Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, and then the Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga Duology, 1 and 2 here. So to talk about Nocturne is honestly not the sort of game that I think I would normally get into. It's very gameplay focused, using that press turn combat system that SMT sort of created, and other games. The games throughout the course of time in the SMT series have used some form of that press turn combat system, including the Persona games. It's a heavily gameplay focused sort of game. It is so hard. It is like extremely hard. It's a difficult game. So story light, gameplay focused, very hard, not the sort of thing I would normally get into. But the team at Atlas making this game, they did something that I honestly don't think any other team has done in my mind, and that is they created a game where the atmosphere tells the story. The vibe of this game is so dark, oppressive, and creepy. There are a lot of words, I guess, that I could use to describe the atmosphere of SMT Nocturne. It's one of the most gorgeous games I've seen too. Like, it picked a style. It chose its style and it fell down on it hard. Like, it is not wishy-washy in any way. It's not going for a hyper-realistic style. It's not going for a super anime style. It defined its own style and it just comfortably lives in it. It's a gorgeous game, and like I said, the atmosphere is so compelling that despite all the things about it that would typically make me shy away, that would probably keep it from being included in a list like this for me of the Western JRPG canon, I think it has more than earned its spot because of that. And then Digital Devil Saga. The thing that's so interesting about Digital Devil Saga to me is that it feels a little bit like the SMT Nocturne team was like, that was really cool, we made this game and people love it. What if we did the same thing but included a really good story this time? Crazy, right? Like, what an idea. And that's what they did. Like, SMT Digital Devil Saga it feels like it's using probably the same engine or a very similar modified version of the engine that they built Nocturne in, but it is like just a compelling story from start to finish told across the two games, right? Like, it's just very, very good, dark science fiction, demon possession, like it's very good. I really hope that, I know Atlas recently brought back SMT Nocturne in the remaster, which I'm fine. Like, I played the remaster a little bit. It looks good. It's fine. Like, it's one of those games that like already looked so good to me that like a remaster didn't even cross my mind as being necessary, because it's like, just port it. It's just like, you know what I mean? Just like port it to the PS5 or whatever and the same graphics, and I don't think anybody would care. It's like, looks so good. But I hope that they do the same thing with Digital Devil Saga, because it definitely is worthy of a same sort of attention that Nocturne got. Okay, this next one is probably going to be controversial, but every now and then it's fun to stir up a little controversy. I'm including one Tales of game from the PlayStation 2 era in my canon, meaning that I think that this is a must-play, required reading, right? If you want to have a full education in Western Japanese role-playing games that came to the West, this is one that you should include in your course syllabus. It is Tales of Legendia. That's right, Tales of Legendia. Not Tales of the Abyss, was that the only other one? Maybe that was the only other one. Regardless, not Tales of Symphonia on the GameCube, right? Like, I'm saying Tales of Legendia is the one out of this generation that I think should be included in the canon. There are a few reasons for that. For me, it boils down to the characters, actually. This is another entry in the, it's the game that came, did it come immediately after Eternia? No, I think there was one or two games in between, but an evolution of that sort of style where, now we have 3D characters and we have 3D battle system, but it's still on a 2D plane. It hasn't adopted that Tales of Symphonia style where characters are kind of moving around, even though it plays on a 2D plane, but it looks 3D. This is a straight up 2D side-scrolling, like when you go into battle, you're fighting on a 2D plane, 100%. And from the gameplay perspective, it's lacking a little bit. I won't say that I hated the gameplay in Tales of Legendia by any means, but I think that what they were doing kind of on the other branch of the Tales of series, the Symphonia side of things, as they were moving towards the more three-dimensional battles, I think that was a better choice in terms of gameplay. Legendia, though, has the characters, and that, to me, the way that these characters are written and the way that they're presented in the game is a big leap forward for storytelling in the genre. So I'll use the character of Shirley as my example. Shirley is like the prototypical heroine / damsel in distress. That's when you meet her, when the game begins, that's your impression of her, and you don't have any reason to doubt that. She looks like it, she sounds like it, initially she acts like it. What you find out about Shirley as the game goes along is she's actually, like, she does come across as very mild, but she actually has an incredibly strong will, okay? And when you finally have her in your party, and this comes at a later point in the game when you finally get her in your party, you expect her as an AI-controlled character to hang back, cast healing magic. That's what she's built for, right? She's not a super strong character physically. She's small, girl. She's going to stand in the back and she's going to cast magic, right? But knowing that she's so strong-willed and so, I don't know, passionate, the way they wrote her AI, when you just leave her on her default AI settings, she runs to the front and she is just whacking at these enemies with her stick or whatever she's got. She's not a strong character. She should not be doing that. But it's so true to her character that it just struck me as being like, they get what they're doing here. They understand that we need the character's behavior in the gameplay to match their character in the story. And it's one of the first games that I really felt nailed that parallel sort of storytelling for the character. All told, I mean, the storyline is really interesting. I have some issues with how the story is told in Tales of Legendia. I probably have talked about it on this channel before. I'm not going to get into it right now, but the storyline I enjoyed very much. The characters are super compelling, super interesting. The music, this is another one where it's like, gosh, I might, even everything else aside, I might include this just for the soundtrack. Goshina, who is quickly becoming one of my all-time favorite video game composers, did the score for this game. He's not the usual Tales of series composer, but he stepped in to do the soundtrack for this one. And gosh, I wish that he did the soundtrack for all of them because he is just a genius. It's a very strange game. It maybe has not aged the best. It's a little slow. You definitely feel that as you play it. But if you can stomach that sort of slower paced PlayStation 2, early PlayStation 2 JRPG sort of thing, I really recommend you give it a try. It's essential to, if nothing else, understanding my taste in JRPGs. It's a really important game to me, and I love it. Okay, I'm going to put Shadow Hearts Covenant in my canon, despite the fact that I did not include either of the two prior games, Koudelka and Shadow Hearts, the original Shadow Hearts, in the canon. Shadow Hearts Covenant takes the cake for me because it is one of the best glow-ups that I think a series has gotten ever. Like, if you look at, even putting Koudelka aside as kind of a pretty different game despite being part of the same series, if you look at Shadow Hearts and you look at Shadow Hearts Covenant side by side, you can see how they got from point A to point B, but point B is so far out here compared to where point A started. It's amazing. Like, the graphical presentation of the game it's like moving from Final Fantasy VII straight to Final Fantasy X. Is what it feels like. You get your pre-rendered backdrops, your kind of basic polygonal characters, to these like richly detailed and highly animated characters in fully 3D environments, in fully acted out cutscenes with just like really good voice work, especially for the time. Really good voice work. And the battle system took all of the things that were good about the battle system in Shadow Hearts, the timed button presses, using the Judgment Ring, and they found ways to make it better in just about every way. You still use the Judgment Ring for just about everything in the game, but you have the ability to customize the Judgment Ring now so that you can find these items that are like, well, I'm going to expand the hit range on the Judgment Wheel, or I'm going to slow the needle down. And like, there's different things you can do to improve your experience in the battles. And not only that, there's a setting where you can basically turn on auto Judgment Ring. Basically, like, you don't have to use the Judgment Ring if like you just can't nail the timing, that's not your forte, but you still want to experience the story. Like, you have that ability to do that now. The game will let you do that, and that is, as an accessibility feature, that's so important. I think it's great for games to be challenging and to require some skill for various things. But if at the core your game is a story and you're telling a story through your game, providing a way for somebody who either doesn't possess the skill to overcome it or has some sort of disability that prevents them from being able to play the game like somebody else might play it, giving them a way to fully experience the story without needing to do all that is great. Like, why not be inclusive? Why not make things better for people if you have the ability to do so? And that's an early example of this sort of accessibility being built into a game. Anyway, for all those reasons and more, it's a fantastic, fantastic game, and absolutely has to be in the canon. Last, I'm going to talk about Xenosaga. You probably knew it was going to be in here. I just grabbed the first game. I should have grabbed the other two. They're on the shelf back there. But I'm really kind of thinking about them all as one unit. So the Xenosaga series on PlayStation 2. Xenosaga is the closest thing we've gotten so far to the promise of Xenogears being fulfilled. Xenogears, when you beat Xenogears, you see an end screen that says Xenogears Episode 5, the end. And our young brains were just lit on fire by this. What does that mean, Episode 5? Well, it turns out that he had planned, Tetsuya Takahashi, the creator, had planned this whole epic 6-part story, and Xenogears was the 5th part of this story. And there were all these other parts that he wanted to tell. Xenosaga, while kind of not being exactly that story, he made quite a few revisions to it between Xenogears coming out and Xenosaga coming out. It's basically an attempt at doing that same thing, telling a similar story in a similar universe with a lot of the same themes, a lot of honestly the same characters, if we're being frank. Like, you know, there's plenty of overlap between Xenogears and Xenosaga. So Xenosaga was, how do I put it? It was taking a big swing, okay? It originally had billed itself as a 6-part series that was going to more or less be telling this one continuous story across what was to be 6 games. Initial sales were not strong, definitely not strong enough to convince the people in power that 6 games made sense. So they had to condense the story down into 3. It suffers quite a bit because of that. I will not lie to you. I was let down quite a bit by episodes 2 and 3. The promise of 1, I can sit down and play 1 and still feel that excitement that I felt as a kid. It's like, man, this is going to be great. What a story. What an epic thing I'm getting into. It's just amazing. 2 and then 3. 3, despite being quite a bit better than 2, still kind of let me down in the long run because of all the condensation that they had to do with the story. But I am including Xenosaga in the canon because of what it was doing and kind of what it showed was possible as far as long-form storytelling goes in video games. Now, we've seen, I guess you could argue, better implementations of long-form storytelling in video games, namely the Trails series, right? The Trails series has been telling one story from beginning to end over the course of, what are we up to, 11, 12 games at this point? And it's remarkable. And they figured out the strategy, right? They figured out how to do it. Divide your story up into arcs and give people natural entry points as you go along so that you don't feel like you have to go back to the first game 20 years ago and play from the beginning if you don't want to or don't have the ability to. Xenosaga did not do that. It was like, you're probably not going to want to play episode 2 if you haven't played episode 1, so you've got diminishing returns as the series goes on. You're never going to get more players playing episode 2 than played episode 1. It just wouldn't make sense. But it was, to my mind, the first long-form Japanese role-playing story. And for that reason alone, it absolutely deserves to be canonized. Last but not least, for the romantic period, I want to throw Kingdom Hearts in here. I might say Kingdom Hearts 2 if I'm talking about which game impressed me more, but I'm just going to say Kingdom Hearts as a concept, as a series. I don't have the original Kingdom Hearts box, I don't think. Do I? No, I don't. I don't, because I very specifically bought this. Picked up Kingdom Hearts, the story so far, so that I didn't have to fill my shelf up with like 15 Kingdom Hearts games. Just got them all in one thing. You know, it's fine. But Kingdom Hearts was like the craziest thing that ever happened, really, if you think about it, in video games or any media. Like, who would have put these 2 universes together, Final Fantasy and Disney? Who thought that made any sense? Well, it doesn't make sense, but it's still just a fantastic series that has sold millions of copies and people are gaga for it. I personally really enjoyed Kingdom Hearts. I loved Kingdom Hearts 2, and I have not played much more than that. I played Chain of Memories, the PS2 remake, I believe. Yeah, Chain of Memories, and I think I watched the cutscenes for 358 Days Over 2, and I think that's all I've done. I think I started Birth by Sleep. I haven't finished it. I'm gonna go back to it and start over because it's been so long, but kind of another example of long-form storytelling in video game form. Taking sort of the same tack that Xenosaga did, unfortunately, where the series can feel kind of overwhelming because it's all one big thing. Like, yeah, it's divided up into different games, and if you just want to play to see the cool Disney characters interacting with the spiky-haired Tetsuya Nomura characters, you can do that, and it's fine, I'm sure, but like, the storyline is pretty complicated, and you're not going to be able to probably follow it very well if you haven't had the experience of the previous games. So it's a challenge to get into, but to their credit, Square Enix have made it pretty easy to do. Like, you can get Kingdom Hearts, the story so far, and play through all of them. Some of the games are just the cutscenes, like they just put the cutscenes as like a movie into the disc here, which, I mean, if you're just trying to get the story, trying to get through the mainline games, but you want to get all the story bits from in between, it's the way to go. So Kingdom Hearts is a very important series as well. It's showing the power of synergy in corporate Japan. It's very real, and it's honestly pretty cool. Okay, now we're moving into the Victorian era. The Victorian era is what I'm calling like the PlayStation 3, Vita kind of era of JRPGs. I did not include any Xbox 360 games on my list. I think that you probably could make an argument for some of them. Tales of Vesperia, you could make an argument for. I only played the remaster on the Switch, so I did not play the original when it came out on 360, so I'm not comfortable necessarily adding it to the canon for this period. Let me know if you think that I should. I agree that it's a fantastic game, and it might have made the list if I'd played it. I'm sure Lost Odyssey probably should be on this list too. Lost Odyssey, like Hironobu Sakaguchi, Final Fantasy creator, putting out, frankly, what I've heard is a pretty banger JRPG on the Xbox 360, should probably be on this list. It's not. I did not play it. I have it, haven't gotten around to it yet. So this is just going to be some PlayStation 3 and Vita games here, and I hope you can forgive the oversights. Thank you. Okay, so I want to just start with, I mean, I feel like I got it, like, duh, it's me. The Trails series, okay? I'm using Cold Steel as sort of my exemplar of the Trails series in general. And obviously the Trails series started a bit before this era and continues on into the modern era. Like, it's like the newest one just came out a week and a half ago or whatever. So like it's an ongoing thing. But my inclusion here of Trails of Cold Steel in the Victorian era, the PlayStation 3 era, is in a way meant to represent the Trails series as a whole. It's in the canon as far as I'm concerned. What more can I say about Trails that I haven't spent hours of my life on this channel saying? Long-form storytelling at its finest, incredible characters, a battle system that has been refined and refined and refined over the years to just like perfection. Daybreak is quite a bit different, but it's just amazing. Like, I think about playing this game when I'm not playing it. Just even the playing of it, not just like the story is amazing and it's great, but like even just playing it, I think about like, oh, it's fun. It's fun. I like it. Trails. That's all I'm gonna say. Trails. I don't care where you start. Doesn't matter to me. Play Trails. Okay. And then I've got actually 2 Tales of games this time. 2 Tales of games in this generation that I would like to canonize, please. Thank you. The first is Tales of Grace's F. Tales of Grace's F is quite a bit different than most of the games in the Tales of series. It has the most in common with Zestiria, I want to say, in terms of gameplay. And Zestiria was not a well-liked entry. I don't think it was for the gameplay. I think it was for other reasons. I liked Zestiria personally, but Tales of Grace's F, I would say, falls on the more hardcore gameplay path of the Tales of series. There's a little more like standard middle of the road gameplay, which is like the main line. Most of the Tales of games fall in that place. Tales of Grace's F and Tales of Zestiria are a little more mechanically focused and a little more challenging, and I actually really enjoyed that. Like the refinements in the gameplay system were really, really good in Tales of Grace's F. I also just really enjoyed the story. It's one that takes place over a longer period of time. So you actually see the characters grow up, and they start out as kids, and then by the time you're done with the game, they're adults. And it's a cool, long, really interesting story in a really compelling world. And speaking of interesting stories and interesting worlds and interesting characters, the other entry, of course, is Tales of Exilia. I don't know. Tales of Exilia. I've started saying Tales of Exilia because I saw a YouTuber say it, and they said it with such confidence. I don't remember which YouTuber it was, actually. It's been a long time now, but they said it with just the utmost confidence. Tales of Exilia. Didn't doubt it. They didn't seem to doubt themselves at all. And so then I just started calling it Tales of Exilia, even though I don't think grammatically that makes sense. Zillia, if anything, which it's nothing, but if it was anything, it would be Zilia, right? Not Exilia. Tales of Exilia. We're just gonna go with it. This is another one where the characters really made it for me. I loved this cast of characters, and the world was super interesting too. Like a lot of games in the Tales of series, it kind of deals with this sort of dichotomy, these sort of opposing worlds, or like worlds that are on two sides of a coin sort of thing. It's a very frequent theme in the Tales of games. Not every game, but quite a lot of them have this sort of theme. Anyway, I don't want to go on forever, but these two entries on the PS3, I think, were some of the very best that the Tales of series has ever done. And if you're looking to just kind of cherry pick a few Tales of games, you don't want to play the whole series, then I recommend the ones that I've mentioned in this video. Like, highly recommend these. They're great on their own, like most of the Tales of games, unless it's a direct sequel. You can just jump in and play them. They're not connected really. So yeah, highly recommend Tales of Exilia and Tales of Grace's F. Check them out. Okay, a couple of Vita games. Now, the first one I want to mention is Ys Origin. I played this initially on the Vita. It's not great on the Vita, I'll just say that. Like, if you can grab it on the Switch or the PS4 or anything but the Vita. The only reason I say that is I dealt with a ton of just really bad slowdown. Playing it on other platforms, that's not really an issue at all. But even with the really bad slowdown at a few points, this Ys Origin is just action RPG combat, like, perfected. It's so fluid and fast and fun, and you're you know, these playing as like little sprites on 3D backgrounds, kind of from a sort of almost a Zelda, but no, it's a little lower of a perspective. It's not quite a 3/4. I don't know what you would call it. But despite, you know, just being these little sprites on these three, like the combat, the hits just feel so solid. It just feels like you're really doing it. I don't know how to explain it. It feels really good to play. The story is actually also really interesting. This is the only Ys game that does not involve Adol Christensen. Like, he's not in this game at all. This is a prequel. But despite that, like, however you feel about Adol, I'm not the biggest silent protagonist fan, as I've said before. None of these characters that you play as 3 different characters in this game. None of them are silent. They're all active participants in the story, which I love. I just love it. So the story is actually really cool. It all takes place in this tower. And that was initially, I was a little bit wary about that. I was like, how good can the story be if it's just all in this like evil tower? But it actually is very compelling. And to get the true ending, you need to play through the game as all 3 characters. You see the whole story, find out what really happened. It's a really cool experience. As far as action RPGs go, as far as the Ys series goes, which is like, you know, one of the pillars of action RPGs, Ys Origin really just deserves to be canonized. So here it is. Next, and I guess, well, last for now, for this era, is a game that I honestly could have included earlier, but I'm choosing to include now because of the refinements that this version of the game brought. And that, of course, is Persona 4 Golden. Persona 4, being part of the SMT franchise, of course, uses a similar kind of press turn battle system. And for me, the battles are fun and great, but it was not the thing that drew me in. What drew me in was the story, and the characters here are so interesting. It was my first Persona, my first real Persona experience. I say real, and not to be insulting, but like, I played Persona 1 on the PS1. I rented it one weekend, did not get it, and returned it. I don't think I played more than an hour of it. Anyway, my first real like modern Persona experience was Golden. And just diving into this world, this super long, probably like 100+ hour long game. If you're not a completionist, you're still going to take 100+ hours to beat this game, especially the first time. And this super long story and just this addictive gameplay loop, right? So it's a combination of like a school life simulator with a dungeon crawler RPG thrown in there as well. So during the day, obviously, I mean, you probably know what Persona is if you're watching this YouTube channel. You probably have heard of it, but just in case you haven't, during the day, you're going to school, you're hanging out with your friends, you're maybe working at a part-time job, you're doing all these different things like your normal life, living a life of a teenager in rural Japan. And then at night, you're jumping into television sets and you're fighting monsters in this like other world. And you're saving people from this crazy killer who's jumping around inside the TVs too and killing people and getting away with it. So it's this like really compelling murder mystery headed up by this cast of really interesting and compelling kids that are super fun, and just their interactions with each other are super cool. Like, this is a game that does not skimp on the characterization. Like, it is fine giving you a big scene where maybe not a lot is moving the story forward, but it's just the characters get a chance to interact with each other, hang out, be friends, and just be real. Like, you really feel like you know these kids, and that's super cool to me. So yes, Persona 4 Golden absolutely is a game that you should play. It's now available on like everything. You can download it on Switch and PlayStation, and I think that's it. But yeah, Xbox as well. I think you can get an Xbox. So you absolutely should play Persona 4 Golden. Please play it. Okay. We have reached the modern era, and that means we've got some modern games to talk about. How am I going to do this? Let's start with Tales of Berseria. Okay. I don't know if this is going to be a controversial choice or not. Tales of Berseria, I think it's a pretty well-liked entry in the series. The Tales of series is typically pretty lighthearted. Not that there's never serious story bits in the Tales of games, but it leans more towards lighthearted. Tales of Berseria is pretty different in that it is a fairly dark and heavy story. And I really connected with that. I like a lighthearted story as much as anybody, but my bread and butter is really kind of the heavy, emotionally resonant stuff. That's what I like. So Berseria gave me that and more. So it not only did it have like a really strong refinement of the entire series gameplay up to that point in this package here, but like it had this dark and really intriguing storyline with complicated characters, with difficult relationships with each other. Like, it's exactly what the series needed at that time. And I think, some of this like carried over into Tales of Arise, which is the most recent entry is Tales of Arise. And I'm not canonizing that one. I think it's a very good game, but it also had a sort of a more serious, like heavy story. But it did incorporate maybe a little bit more of the lighthearted elements from time to time than Berseria did. Anyway, Berseria is a fantastic entry. And again, if you are looking to just dive in and play a Tales of game, Berseria is a perfectly great one to just pick up and play. All right. I haven't included one since the very beginning, and that's because I didn't play a lot of them growing up. I played most of them now as an adult, but I don't know why that's not a consistent criteria for me, I acknowledge, but I don't feel like this series really started resonating with me until I played this entry. And then I was able to go back and experience the older ones and have a greater appreciation for them now than I did then. Obviously, I'm talking about Dragon Quest XI, Echoes of an Elusive Age. Dragon Quest XI does everything that it can to make you feel like you are still a kid, right? Like let me put it this way. There are so many elements that are direct parallels of the first Dragon Quest, like the sound effects, the monster designs. It is comfort food in video game form. Okay, so those elements of the game have carried over across the series from the very beginning. And it is really cool to play a modern game with like beautiful anime 3D graphics and amazing animations and beautiful music, but still have these little things that just remind you so strongly of the games that you played when you were really little. There's something about that just feels very cool. Dragon Quest XI is, if you haven't played any other Dragon Quest game, yeah, sure, you're not going to feel that nostalgic pull, but it is on its own, even aside from the nostalgia, such a great game. Just a great game. Like the combat system is super fun. The storyline, I frankly was not expecting the storyline to be great. I figured it'd be fine. This is great. Like it takes so many twists and turns, and including a massive one at like the midway point that I just did not see coming at all. Had no idea, and it works and it's brilliant. Dragon Quest XI. If you've never played a Dragon Quest game, just grab it and play it. Like, I do not think, if you like JRPGs and you somehow haven't played any Dragon Quest games, I don't think you're going to regret playing Dragon Quest XI. I don't think so. You're gonna love it. Just play it. Okay, I've talked about this game quite a bit on this channel. I'm gonna talk about it some more now. That's Blue Reflection Second Light. Okay, I really enjoyed the original Blue Reflection. It's a much simpler game. than Second Light. There's less to do, the environments are less interesting, less varied, but the vibes of that game were so strong. It's another, similar to how I talked about back previously with SMT Nocturne, how the vibes and the atmosphere kind of told the story. It's sort of like that. There's more of a story in the original Blue Reflection than there is in SMT3, I would say. But the vibes and the atmosphere are still super, super, super strong. Blue Reflection Second Light takes all that, the vibes and the atmosphere, and is like, this worked. This was good. There were other parts that were not quite so good. And what they did was they just improved it in every way. It's possibly it's one of the best examples of iterative design, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. Like, there's nothing in here that's drastically different than the first game, but, well, maybe with the exception of the battle system, and I'll get there in a minute. But all of the other elements of the game are like iteratively designed based on elements that were in the original Blue Reflection, but they are just so much better in every way. It's such a fun game to play. It's just fun to play. Not only that, it's got a really compelling story. It's got a ton of characters. The first game just had your 3 characters and that you were pretty much stuck with. There's just so many characters in this game. It's amazing. The combat system is probably the thing that's changed the most. It is technically a turn-based game, kind of real-time turn-based. I don't know how to put it. It's most similar to actually Grandia. If you've played Grandia, you know that you have your characters and your enemies are on a bar at the bottom of the screen or the side of the screen. I don't remember exactly where it is placed in Grandia, but they're moving along, and at a certain point they reach an action part of the meter where they can then start taking an action. So whether that's attacking, casting a spell, whatever. And then between the action meter and the end of the bar, there's a little bit of space that the character has to move through in order to be able to actually execute their command. And it's entirely possible for an enemy to knock you out during that little window and cancel your attack, and you can do the same to enemies. Blue Reflection has a very similar system to that, where you're on this bar together with your enemies. The biggest difference is that there are multiple points along the bar that you can act. You can choose to act at these various points. However, waiting longer will give you more options. You'll have more possibilities for attack at your disposal if you wait longer. However, waiting longer could be detrimental, because if an enemy is going to be attacking you, you might want to find a way to defend yourself. And there's just so many layers to this combat, and it's so frantic. And at first I was afraid I wasn't going to get it, and then I was afraid I wasn't going to like it. Turns out I love it. It took me a little while to get used to it, but I absolutely love the combat in Blue Reflection Second Light. It's just a brilliant, brilliant game. And you don't have to play the first one to play Second Light. I still recommend the first one. I think it's a good game and it's worth checking out. But at the very least, Second Light, should definitely play it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna canonize the remake trilogy. All right, I know that the third one isn't out yet, but we're just gonna get a jump on it. Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are honestly 2 of the best games I've ever played. They are, in my mind, the full realization of the promise of the story of Final Fantasy VII. It's what I imagined the story in Final Fantasy VII to be, and even more than that. It's an astonishing achievement in storytelling. The fact that so many of the original developers are, first of all, still around at Square and still thinking about this game just like we are, 25 years later, whatever. We're like, let's take all of this accumulated knowledge that we've gained from making games over these last decades, and let's take another crack at it. Like, let's try again. Let's do another version of this game. Why not? We love it so much. They love it so much. Let's do it. And it's so interesting to me, like we're looking at, JRPGs as a canon, as the list of the must play to fully grasp the JRPG genre. These are the games that I think you absolutely should check out if you want to, have an understanding of JRPGs. The fact that it just makes me wonder, like, if any of these old English authors had an opportunity like this back then to come back to a work that they had done. Beowulf, how would you rewrite Beowulf? Whoever wrote Beowulf, I don't remember. I studied it in school, I think. I don't remember. But what would you do differently? I'm sure that the author would do some things differently. They would have the experience that they've lived since they wrote the original work under their belt and they would do things a little bit differently. And that's exactly what the remake trilogy is. It is a chance for Kazushige Nojima, Tetsuya Nomura, all of them to not necessarily right wrongs, like there's nothing wrong with Final Fantasy VII, but to do things in a different way that is going to be satisfying to them. And I think going to be satisfying to us too. It's definitely satisfying to me so far. It's, there are some big changes, not just to the story. Obviously, there are some big changes to the story, but there's big changes to the combat. It's no longer a turn-based game. It is fully action RPG. And that works for me. Like, I loved seeing like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children and just the crazy action in that movie. And to be able to play a game that does a decent job of like replicating that action. Like, we always talked about how we wanted games to feel like that. And like, we finally have it. Like, it's possible now for a game to look and feel like, Advent Children, or pretty close to it. And that's astonishing to me. It's just like, I don't know, maybe it's controversial to put the remake trilogy, to call it canon, to say like, this is, you have to really get this genre, you got to play these games, you should check them out. But I'm going to stand by it because I feel like it's such an important work, and it doesn't replace Final Fantasy VII. If anything, it depends so heavily on Final Fantasy VII that it's almost like you think of it as a series and not as a remake, as a sequel to Final Fantasy VII. It's not, but you know what I mean? Like, it depends so heavily on VII existing and your knowledge of VII to get the full experience out of it, that I don't think it's a detriment to Final Fantasy VII, the original. I think it amplifies Final Fantasy VII as the original game. Like, it's even more necessary than ever. Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy. Check it out. Okay, I'm gonna throw Octopath Traveler and Octopath Traveler 2, I guess, as well into the canon, just because I really appreciate everything that those games have done for the genre. Like, they showed us that not every compelling game from a big studio has to be the biggest budget. It doesn't have to be a Final Fantasy VII remake. They crafted what is, to me, one of the most interesting graphical styles. And I know there's people that are sick of it, would like to see HD 2D not be relied upon as much. To me, though, it captures what it felt like to play 16-bit games. Like, you look at a 16-bit game, it doesn't look anything like Octopath Traveler or Live Alive or any of these other HD 2D games. But the emotion that it evokes in me is the same emotion that those games evoked in me, from a graphical standpoint. So these geniuses at Square Enix figured out how to do that, how to create that in graphic form and put it on the screen for me. And that's great. I also love the resurgence of sort of the old school turn-based combat. I don't need Final Fantasy to be turn-based anymore, because Square Enix has continued the tradition with these other games, Octopath Traveler, Bravely Default. Like, these games are as much Final Fantasy as any Final Fantasy was. I think bringing Octopath and its sequel, which is basically just more Octopath, into the canon makes sense, because these are now the standard bearers for turn-based JRPGs in the Final Fantasy vein going forward. All right, I want to talk about Xenoblade. Let's talk about Xenoblade. I'm a Tetsuya Takahashi stan, and I love the Xeno series. I've included every piece of it so far here, and I'm including Xenoblade Chronicles. We'll throw in Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is in the previous generation. I probably should have included it there, but we're talking about Xenoblade as a whole, so I'm gonna put X in there as well. But the Xenoblade games, they are Tetsuya Takahashi figuring out how to tell the sort of story he wants to tell without confusing people too much, or without making them feel like they're missing something. It's sort of a covert, long-form storytelling. You can play all the way through Xenoblade Chronicles and not feel any particular connection to the greater Xeno series. You can play almost to the very end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 without even realizing it's connected in any way to the first game. And then you can get into Xenoblade Chronicles 3 without having played either of them and still get a a fulfilling storyline experience, but playing them in sequence and really seeing that story unfold across these games and the broader Xeno universe is just such a cool experience. And it's really great to see Takahashi finally be able to do this. Like, he has so much more freedom than he ever had working with Nintendo. And it's a little crazy to me actually to think, because I always associate, even to this day, the Xeno series with PlayStation, but it has had just as many, if not more, entries on Nintendo platforms, and the company just has so much more freedom. Monolith Soft has so much more freedom under Nintendo than they did anywhere else. So I don't know, I'm really excited to see where Takahashi takes the series after this, especially with some of the revelations at the end of the DLC in Xenoblade 3. If you know, you know. But yeah, I'm just pumped for more Xeno in whatever form it comes in. Last, but certainly not least, I'm gonna put Harvestella in the canon. And if you've been around my channel for any length of time, you probably know that Harvestella is one of my favorite games of all time. Not just my favorite Switch game, which it is, but one of my favorite video games, period. I mean, I don't know that anything emotionally could replace Chrono Trigger for me. It's Chrono Trigger, it's so important. But if there was like a second place just sliding in right under Chrono Trigger, it's Harvestella. You gotta play Harvestella. If you hate farming games, don't worry about it. Farming, not that important. You can make it as important as you want to. You can, if you enjoy farming, you can make a big deal out of the farming. You can have a great time. There's a lot of options for you if you are a digital farmer. If you are not, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's so minimal. It's so minimal, the required farming. You don't have to worry about it. The action RPG combat is really good. There's a whole job system in there, which I did not see coming, that basically, like, you can, every time you meet a new party member, you gain access to that job class so that you can also take on that job class. And it just gives you so many options for how you want to play. If you find that one or two jobs just work for you, you don't have to switch to the other. Like, there's so much freedom and flexibility in how to play this game. The things that most did it for me in this game, though, are the story, the characters, and just the design of the world. The character designs, the art design is just so beautiful. It is just one of the, it's like not a high budget title, guys, but it is still one of the most beautiful games that I've ever played. It is astonishing what they were able to do. The music, again, by Go Shiina. I mentioned him with Tales of Legendia was in the previous video. Yeah, well, whenever I talked about Tales of Legendia, I talked about Go Shiina's soundtrack being one of the highlights, and his soundtrack here was literally the reason I bought the game. When I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, farming sim, not really interested. Not my thing. And then I saw that Go Shiina was doing the music, and I pre-ordered it. Like, I was like, I'm getting it. I don't, like, maybe I'll hate it, but like, it's a Go Shiina game. He's doing the soundtrack. I'm picking it up. And I'm so glad I did, because if I had skipped it, if I had slept on it because I thought it was a farming sim, and I'm not really into farming sims all that much, if I had skipped it, I would have not gotten my second favorite game of all time. And that's crazy to think. But it was so close to not playing this game because of what I thought it was. And let me just assure you, if you were like me, it's not what you were thinking. It is so much more. It is so much better. That's the canon, guys. Well, I mean, it's my canon that I came up with in my basement, and maybe yours is different. I would love to hear how yours differs. If there are any games that you think that I've overlooked, or, you know, I don't know, like, maybe I did just forget. That's possible. I've played so many games over the years. Maybe I just did forget to include some. Maybe I haven't played them, and your recommendation might get me to play them. So please let me know down in the comments if you have suggestions for games that I should include in my canon of JRPGs. Thank you, as always, for watching, for liking, for subscribing. You make doing this so much fun. I would have never had any idea it would be this much fun to do YouTube. You guys have made it fun. So thank you so much for doing that for me. Thank you so much. And I hope that you will stick around and watch more videos. Until next time, bye.